Ever catch yourself chasing that good feeling, that burst of energy where you feel like you can do anything?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
It's like we're all chasing dopamine without even realizing it. And that's what we're diving into today, that chemical everyone's after.
Right.
To help us unlock the secrets of dopamine, we've got our expert here, ready to break it all down.
Absolutely. It's interesting because people usually link dopamine to pleasure, happiness.
Yeah.
But it's way more complicated than that.
It's not just a feel good, I got a reward kind of thing. There's a
Yes.
whole other side to it,
Yeah.
right? Like, what about this idea of a dopamine roller coaster? That's what really caught my attention from the research we dug into. What's that all about?
Yeah, it's a really good way to think about it, actually.
Mm.
Picture, like an actual roller coaster. You've got those big highs, but then you know what comes after,
Mm-hmm.
the lows. That's basically how dopamine works in our brains. We get that surge of excitement, that peak when we do something we enjoy, but then comes the drop, the low, and we might feel blah or even a little down.
So it's not just about always chasing the highs.
Exactly. And here's the thing about those intense dopamine highs. They often lead to even bigger crashes afterwards. Like you're borrowing energy from the future, and you end up with this dopamine debt. Then you have to chase more intense things just to get that same feeling. But the lows, they hit harder and more often.
Makes sense. Okay, so how does this actually show up in our everyday lives?
Well, think about those times you're pushing yourself to hit a deadline. Working late, loading up on coffee just to stay focused. Or maybe you're scrolling through social media for hours, getting those little hits from each like or comment.
Ouch. Yeah, I feel that.
Exactly. All those things spike your dopamine, but then comes the crash. You might feel completely drained, no motivation, even a little down after that initial buzz wears off.
Hmm.
And the danger is we try to get back to that high using the same things, and it just turns into this cycle that's hard to break.
So we get stuck chasing that feeling without realizing what's really going on in our brains. Okay, so this dopamine roller coaster is fascinating and a little scary. But if we're kind of wired this way, are we fighting a losing battle? Like, I've always struggled with being messy, ever since I was a kid. Is that just my brain stuck on autopilot?
Right, right.
Is there any hope for me to change that, or am I stuck on this dopamine loop?
You know what? Our brains are surprisingly good at adapting.
Really?
Yeah, even as adults, we can still change and grow.
Mm-hmm.
It's called neuroplasticity, which basically means our brains can rewire themselves
Okay, neuroplasticity. I've heard that before, but
based on what we do and the habits we have.
how does that work, like practically?
So think of your brain like, say, a forest path. Every time you have a thought or you do something, it's like you're walking on that path. And over time, it gets more and more defined.
Right.
And it's easy to fall back into those same patterns, even if they're not so great for us.
So those messy habits are like my well-worn path.
Exactly.
I'm imagining a trail of like coffee cups and socks right now.
That's it. But here's the good news. You can make new paths. Instead of letting your brain go down that messy path, you choose a different one, the organized one.
So how do I convince my brain to take that detour?
Well, Huberman talks about rewriting the story that your brain tells itself. Remember those paths? They came from repeating the same things to ourselves, like, I'm messy, I can't organize.
Yeah.
To change the path, you have to change the story.
Okay, I get that. But how do you actually do that?
It's about shifting that voice in your head. So instead of, I'm messy, you start saying, I'm becoming more organized. Or I always forget things becomes, I'm getting better at remembering.
Basically, you're giving your brain a new script, a more positive one.
Yeah. And the cool part is, as you change how you talk to yourself,
Yeah.
and even if you make just small changes towards being organized, your brain actually starts looking for proof that this new story is true.
Wow, so it's like a positive feedback loop. The more you live that news story, the more your brain believes it.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm convinced this is powerful stuff. But let's get practical. How do we apply all this to, like, boosting our energy and focus?
Well, Huberman has this toolkit for managing energy throughout the day. And it's not about some crazy biohacking thing.
Good, because I don't think I have the energy for that.
Right. It's really about working with your body, not against it.
Okay, so what's in the toolkit?
Well, the foundation is sleep. Sounds basic, but there's so much confusion around it.
Like that whole 8 hours for everyone thing.
Yeah, that's a myth.
Okay, good.
Huberman says how much sleep you need depends on you. Some people are good with 7 hours, others need closer to 9. You have to figure out what's right for your body.
So no more guilt trips if I don't fit into some perfect sleep mold.
Exactly. It's more about quality over quantity.
And listening to your body.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you're having trouble sleeping, He suggests trying something called NSDR,
NSDR.
non-sleep deep rest.
Oh, I've actually been trying that out lately. It's been a game changer. It's like this, I don't know, super powered nap.
Yeah, but you don't actually fall asleep.
Right.
And the best part is, it's easy to do. Huberman even has some guided ones on YouTube. You can try it out for free.
Nice. So sleep and NSDR, check. Now, what about the other stuff we always hear about, like diet and exercise?
So important. Those are key parts of his toolkit, too.
Yeah.
He's big on getting sunlight in the morning, which, let's be real, most of us don't get enough of.
Especially not if you hit that snooze button a few times.
Right. But that morning light really affects our cortisol levels.
Right. Cortisol, it's that hormone that everyone associates with stress, but we need it to function.
Exactly. It's about balance.
Yeah.
Too much, and you're wired and stressed. Too little, and you're sluggish and have zero motivation. Morning sunlight helps get that rhythm in check.
So open the blinds as soon as you wake up. Got it. Now, what about food? I feel like people are skeptical about how much diet really affects motivation.
I get it, but what we eat has a huge impact on our brain chemistry,
Right.
which in turn affects our energy, focus, even our motivation, like you said.
So it's not just about eating healthy, it's about the how and the why.
Yeah, and something that really stuck with me was that Huberman said a lot of high achievers he works with, they don't do restrictive diets.
Huh.
They focus on whole, nutritious foods. It's not about deprivation. It's about giving your body and brain what they actually need.
So ditch the fad diets, focus on real food.
Yes.
It makes you wonder, what else are we doing wrong with food?
It's amazing how much what we like to eat is shaped by our habits and experiences. If you're always having processed foods, those things loaded with sugar, salt, and artificial flavors, your taste buds get used to that. Your brain craves it, even if it's not good for you.
So it's kind of like rewiring our relationship with food, just like we were talking about those brain pathways earlier.
That's a great way to put it. When you bring more whole foods into your diet, you're basically retraining your taste buds to enjoy those subtler, more natural flavors.
Right.
And eventually that healthy food becomes more appealing both to your tongue and to your brain.
Okay, that makes so much sense. So it's not just about forcing ourselves, it's about understanding how our brains work and making choices that help us. Sleep, NSDR, sunlight, movement, nutrition. That's quite a toolkit already. It's amazing how much goes into optimizing our energy. But there's one tool we haven't even touched on: relationships.
Oh, you're so right.
We always talk about dopamine with productivity, our own individual goals, but it plays such a big role in our connections with other people.
It's huge.
Okay.
And it's essential for our well-being.
It's a good reminder that even though we're talking brain chemistry, all this individual stuff, we're still social creatures at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Our connections really impact our dopamine systems.
And you know, what's fascinating is that dopamine isn't just about that initial spark. It's about keeping those bonds over time. That's what keeps the excitement and the joy alive in those long-term relationships.
Okay, so how does that work? Keeping things exciting long term. Do we have to constantly be doing new things?
Well, Huberman talks about something called the Coolidge effect. It's this thing where, say, in the animal world, introducing a new mate can actually reignite passion and desire.
So novelty is important, even in romantic relationships.
Exactly. And while it's debatable how much that directly applies to humans, it does show just how powerful novelty can be for keeping that spark alive.
That makes sense. Not that I'm suggesting anyone go out looking for new partners.
Right, of course not.
But it makes you think about how to bring that sense of excitement into your existing relationship.
Precisely. Find ways to create those little moments of novelty.
So how do we do that? Give us the actionable steps.
It could be something as simple as, oh, I don't know, trying a new activity together, exploring somewhere new, or even just talking about something you've never discussed before.
Getting out of that routine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's often those small, consistent things that make the biggest difference. Huberman actually talked about the power of something as basic as a daily good morning text.
Wow.
It's a small gesture, but it's that regular reminder that you care.
Those micro moments, those tiny connections, they build up over time.
Exactly, and it keeps those dopamine pathways strong.
This has been so insightful. As we wrap up our deep dive into dopamine, what's the most important thing you want our listeners to take away from all of this?
You know, I think the biggest takeaway is that there's no magic formula when it comes to dopamine and motivation. We're all different.
Right.
Different brain chemistry, different energy levels, different needs. What works for one person might not work for another. It's about understanding yourself, what makes you tick.
So self-awareness, experimentation.
Yes. Try those tools we talked about. Play around with your sleep schedule, check out NSDR, get some morning light, move your body, nourish yourself with good food, and don't forget about those important relationships.
It's about finding what works for you.
Exactly. And be kind to yourself. It's a journey, not a race. Keep learning, keep growing, even if you don't have it all figured out.
I love that. It's about becoming the best version of ourselves.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into dopamine. And to everyone listening, keep experimenting, keep exploring, and keep that dopamine flowing. We'll catch you in the next episode.